And welcome back in to another episode of Tribal Council Chat. As always, we're your hosts. I'm Bruce Heller,
My name's Brett Parnell.
and let's dive in. So we're recapping episode 2 of Survivor 45, and it starts with Lulu getting back from Tribal Council from the previous episode. And what stuck out to you from this scene?
Um, just both. Emily's action, I think, is the main part, but also how she's able to not have the tribe isolate her and get the show showing us at this point that she may have been going home. She probably was until Hannah quit, but that she still got a chance in this game until your fire's gone, still there.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll definitely get into Emily a little bit this episode. I was just for how direct and honestly how negative she was in the first episode. I was kind of surprised at how surprised she was that she would have been going home, that she would have gotten votes. She was so surprised by that reaction at Tribal Council. And what we definitely see a disconnect between her and Sabaya more than her with anyone else, I feel like.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially at this point, before we get into the second scene, she's really on her own, most distant from Sabaya, but at the same time, still playing. So we'll see how this season goes.
Yeah, for sure. And so once we
And
finish the post tribal, we have a theme song again.
yes,
We
that's
have an
what I
intro
was
for the
just gonna
first
bring
time,
up.
and I don't remember when.
Quite a while.
And so, what is your favorite intro song? Because mine, the one that sticks out to me is Australian Outback, because it's got the didgeridoo right at the beginning.
So do you want to start at the top? Because I know we prepared a list of three.
I Yeah, that was the one I had that stuck out to me. I've been trying to think. I know you said you had three. I've been trying to think of two others. So
Oh, perfect. Yeah, that's definitely a great choice. If I start at the top for mine, I think it's kind of on the same lines as yours, Bruce. I've always liked when they've incorporated those local elements into the theme song. So the one that sticks out to me was Africa.
that's a great one too. Africa, Pearl
And
Islands kind of sticks out to me as being that way. It's just the music sounds kind of more piratey than normal because pirates were their whole
yeah,
shtick that season. So
that was my number three on my like top three list was Pearl Islands.
nice. And so we get back after our theme song, which I love this theme song. We're at re
Just a second. Can I just get into to number two right before we continue?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, perfect. Because I had this written down again. The elements, the local culture, the local music. Can I finally do a like top three list on this podcast and put Survivor Thailand into the conversation?
Okay, that one's cool. I will give Thailand that. I don't give Thailand credit for much, but I'll give them that. That is a really good one. Mm,
And I
there's
find
been some
I
great
find it
theme songs.
interesting too. That Pearl Islands. Second, I'm just gonna check the year. I think Pearl Islands was 2004. Am I right?
I think that's right.
Sorry, my phone doesn't want to cooperate with me today.
No, you're fine.
Um, Pearl Islands came out in the fall of 2003, which I find is really interesting because that they used all that like very piratey theme music because only a couple of months before in the summer of 2003 was the first movie of Johnny Depp's Pirates of the Caribbean.
Oh, that was the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie year. I couldn't remember what year. That's funny. I bet that's why they did such a pirate heavy season.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Like Pirates of the Caribbean was such a big hit summer, and then they did Pearl Islands and Drake and Morgan and that music 3 months later. So it was such a good production decision.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Pearl Islands is an awesome season. Go watch it if you haven't. And so we come out of the theme song and we're at Reba's camp. And honestly, Reba's just vibing. Like I love Sifu. Sifu's hilarious. We see a scene of him just like jumping at a tree and karate chopping it for some reason. He gives me Tony energy, just the chaotic camp life Tony.
I agree. It'll be interesting. I know we've seen it like elsewhere with the that's gonna come when we start talking about the vote and whatnot. But I wonder if we might get a flashback here at some point in regards to the idol.
Yeah, and the idol. We'll talk about this season's idol at some point because it's a real. We see what's different about it this season, and it's really weird and a really cool concept that I like.
Oh, I love it too. But I think see like does maybe will you just have a tribe that's just vibing and living on the island and winning everything and will probably continue to do so.
Yeah,
Do you could they be playing maybe that like side of the game and we're just not seeing it yet because it hasn't been imported? And should they we get some more information of what's going on now down the road?
I think we're not seeing a ton of gameplay from Reba and Bello because Lulu is just Luzon again, where they're gonna take up a majority of the screen time because they're kind of a mess. Not kind of, they're a lot of a mess, and they're
Yeah,
entertaining, and that's gonna take up a lot of the screen time. I mean, you look at Kagion before it went down to two tribes, a majority of what we saw was Luzon. You didn't see, which was Brains. You didn't see a ton of Apari, and I'm drawing a blank. Luzon, Apari, what was the third one?
I forget to.
Braun. I'll just call him Braun
Yeah.
because I forget who the orange tribe was.
The only time that you would see Braun is when Sarah is just brilliantly calling out Tony.
Yeah, when she's asking Tony if he's a cop and he tries to lie about it, then goes back like an hour later and says, "No, you were right," because he's Tony and he's messy. But
That was great.
my favorite version of Tony might be Game Changers Tony, honestly. And so, also in this scene at Reba's camp, we see Austin and J Maya trying to decipher this code together. And then Austin pulls out his clue and holds it up to the sign. And he does decode it, dig in the fallen palm tree X. And really cool way to do a hint. I don't remember seeing quite this version of the hint before. So that was cool.
It was really cool and it was interesting to see because once they thought of the idea, I sat there watching it going, I would have never thought of that. But once I got the idea, I'm like, wait a minute, you can read this clue without matching.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. I love it. And so our next scene is at Bello Camp, who's also just kind of vibing. Well, most of them
Yeah.
are. We seem everyone seems to be loving Bruce so far, except for one person. And Katura does not like Bruce at all for her reasons. But everyone else on Bello, aside from Katura not liking Bruce, is just vibing. Like they're having a good old time over on Bello.
It's gonna be really interesting should they lose, and I'm not saying that they will anytime soon because they seem like a very strong tribe.
Yeah.
But should they, on where some of these alliances are gonna go, because we see like take someone like Kelly has to get along with both Booth and Katura. and so does Kendra, and so does Brando.
I actually have a Kelly note on here that she's just her quote was, let me see, about being able to bro out with the boys and then be besties with the girls also and be aligned on both sides. And she's looking
So,
really good over on Bello so far. And so, yeah, Bello's interested. Kelly's in a really good place. Bruce is in a really good place. Like, they're all calling him uncle, which is exactly what he wants them to call him. So his plan seems to be going pretty much according to how he wanted
Bruce
it
is
to.
getting into that spot where, yes, I see like what Katura means, where he's telling them what to do sometimes, but at the same time, like you say, with them calling him uncle, he's not sitting back pretending he has no experience when he obviously does, but he's also not being BB back in Borneo, pissing
Yeah.
everybody off.
I mean, he has
And if
some experience, but they've been there long enough though, to where he's beyond where his experience got him. He's been there longer than he was in 44.
in terms of 44, absolutely, I mean his military experience.
Oh, sorry. I thought you meant experiences being out on the island. I'm like, yeah, he's kind of past that already.
Yeah. He was past that on day one.
Yeah, like 12 hours in. But I do love Bruce so far. He just seems like a really fun personality.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And so we now go back to Lulu camp where we see Emily searching for an idol because she knows she's getting all the votes if they go back again. And then we have, and Emily sees right through it. They all decide to search for an idol and they don't want her to see it alone. So they go, hey, let's search for it in teams. And
Yeah.
I appreciate Emily's honesty here. She goes, I'd rather
Yeah.
search for it myself. You guys just don't want to see me find it.
Exactly. It's if you're in the quote majority, it's such an obvious move that you have to make. But at the same time, it's so obvious what's going on to her that it there's been so it's like, what else can you say?
Yeah. And it kind of gave me flashbacks to, and not to keep referencing the same season, but the episode of Kagion where it's just pandemonium over an idol clue. Where they don't want Spencer to
Style.
find it, so they have Cass stand there and babysitting him while he's looking for it. And it made me think
Yeah.
of that a little bit.
Yeah, I agree.
But and throughout all this idol searching, Brandon ends up finding it. And Sabaya sees him find it, so the two of them know about it. So I feel like that in that moment what I'm thinking is that kind of bonds them a little bit.
Hmm. Until it comes with a message
Oh
when
yeah.
Brandon finds it
He,
that ultimately really affects, I almost think, that this whole tribe
yeah,
and
he
how this episode goes. Because could you imagine? Let's hypothetically say Emily finds it, but she doesn't find the idol, and they don't have fire as we see. Then that we'll get into in a bit. But if the whole tribe's main target doesn't have a vote, it's so easy to get rid of them.
yeah, and honestly, like since the beware advantages became a thing, everyone that's found it has been like, yeah, okay, I'll risk my vote for this.
Yeah.
Brandon thinks he has the idol, realizes it's the beware, and goes to put it back. Like he's the first person we've seen kind of care about his vote in that way. And we see him care about his vote again when he goes to the island journey, which we'll talk about in just a second, because that's the next note I have on my list. But
Yeah.
he puts the beware advantage back, and Sabaya picks it right back up and risks her vote, meaning she can't vote at the next tribal.
Yeah.
And so, since I mentioned it, we have the Advantage Island, Oh, sorry. This is Brandon choosing not to risk his vote, was I have written down with him giving it to Sabaya. The advantage island comes later. So we're back at Reba camp, and once again, Reba's just vibing. Like we have a whole scene about how Dee can pick things up with her toe and use her feet to pick things up, which is just this is the part of Survivor I love. It's just them at camp vibing out, getting to know each other, having fun.
I mean, I don't think anybody from this tribe is probably going to go pre-merge. So looking at like some people that are over there, like we mentioned, D, Seifu, Austin, it'll be interesting to see how some of them adapt to potentially like playing the game for the first time as individuals. Because I could almost see one of them playing like a very Michelle and Coron game where they don't see tribal until they're merged.
Yeah. And one thing I do have noted from Reba before we go back to Lulu again is we saw on day one that Bruce said he didn't want to be dad and didn't want to be like this father figure. Meanwhile, with Reba, we see Julie has kind of become the mom, and she's taking the opposite approach. She's fully leaning into that role and leaning into that kind of parental figure. And I just think that contrast is kind of interesting between one person very much leaning into it and one person, the first thing he says on their beach is, I'm not dad. So,
It's interesting, though. I mean, to an extent, Julie is doing well at it, where she's integrating herself in the tribe. She talked about like some of you could be friends with my kids, but she hasn't gone all Rimdeli on us and sunk her own game as a result of being the tribe's mom.
yeah, I feel like this is kind of what Lindsay Carmine could have been in 43 had the paranoia not just run rampant and pushed her into basically getting herself voted off because she kept asking people to reassure her. But I think this role, this tribe mom role, is going to work out really well for Julie. So good for her.
Yeah.
And so next we go back to Lulu, where we have what might have been one of my favorite scenes of the episode. It is we see Kaleb building this bond with Emily, and we
Yeah.
see a
My favorite
confessional
scene of
from
this episode.
we have a confessional from her after that where she's realizing her mistakes early on. That she's used to being a very calculated person. And the quote from her that I wrote down is people aren't stocks.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah. That's so smart. I think this is a really interesting bond as we see, because something I wrote down is like the two of them are such opposite players in this tribe, but almost in a perfect way, in where Emily really knows the strategy portion of this game.
yeah.
She doesn't seem to know the social portion of this game at all.
Yeah.
In contrast, Kaleb seems like probably the nicest person on this season, someone that you would really want to get to know. Shout out to Kaleb. He follows this podcast now, thanks to me supporting him this season.
Yeah.
And he can, I almost think if you take his skills, the two of them could go very far together if they can work off of each other's assets and benefit each other where the game's weaknesses stand.
Yeah. And this is smart from Kaleb because Emily's kind of the one being ostracized at this point. And keep in mind, just the episode before, she was trying to put a target on him too. And so by kind of building that bond with her, you're not only like from her perspective, you're the one that reached out to her when no one else would, but
Exactly.
you neutralize the relationship with the person that was trying to target you, and you're not on bad terms with anyone. You're friends with everyone. You've got all your bases covered if you're Kaleb. But
Very true.
I just love seeing that moment of growth from Emily where she's starting to realize how poorly she'd been handling things so far. And the quote I have written down is Emily possibly not the villain anymore question mark because After listening to episode 1 recap from, I think it was Survivor Specialist, shout out to that podcast. They were talking about how, like, in the new era, we really haven't had a strong villain in a while. We've had like people like Jesse and Ricard, or maybe even Omer, where like the gameplay is a little bit villainous, but like them as people are just like they're enjoyable. And like in episode 1, Emily was just straight up like very bold, very upfront, very negative. And we were starting to think maybe we finally had that villain character again that we loved, but we loved to root against.
Yeah.
And now it's episode 2 and she's growing, and maybe she's not going to be the villain anymore. I think it'll be interesting to see where she's growing on me. I didn't like her at all after the first episode, and now she's
Yeah.
growing on me. She's not my favorite, but
Yeah, I agree. Um, it'll be really interesting to see where things land, but as we know too, this is an extremely stressful social experiment. So will she grow from that in future episodes, or will some point of conflict come up, be it in this tribe or be it in a swap tribe or a merge tribe, and it could set her right back to where she was 5 minutes into the game during the marooning, calling out Bruce.
yeah. And maybe the social game doesn't get better. Maybe I'm reading too much into one episode. But even if it doesn't, I could see her being the type of person that people want to sit next to at the end.
Absolutely.
Like, no matter what happens, even if she gets voted out next, what a like casting and production hit a home run with Emily. And I just want to shout them out for that real quick because they've been getting a lot of crap for casting Hannah on the show, who quit earlier than anyone ever had, and rightfully so.
Yeah,
But not somebody who should have
I
been
mean,
cast, but they
I
hit a
don't
home
know
run with
why.
Emily.
Oh, they did. I Hannah is a complete miss. Obviously, she was there for 2 days and had enough. But I mean, I'm not sure why the overall sense has been people disappointed with the cast. Overall, I think the cast is very strong.
The cast has been really strong this season. It was decently strong last season, and I mean, I'm in the minority of people that like this season, but I liked the cast on 43 fairly well. I mean, I know a lot of Survivor Twitter seems to not like that season, but I enjoyed it.
I mean, to me, even I'm like, cast wise, I think they've done excellent ever since really like the whole new era.
Yeah, ever like from 41 forward, casting is just done incredible. There's been duds here and there, and Hannah's an obvious miss. She quit sooner than anyone ever has before. Maybe fair play, I'm not sure. But well, he technically was voted out, I guess.
Voted off.
Yeah. He quit for all intents and purposes though. Like asking to be voted out versus saying I quit is not that big of a difference.
You're right.
But and so after this really cool Emily scene, we see a boat come to each camp, and Drew goes for Reba, and Brandon goes for Lulu, and Bruce ends up going for Bella, which again, for the third time, I think, we see a confessional of Katura not being happy about this and rehashing that she doesn't like Bruce and wants him gone first chance she gets. So if they do go to tribal, I feel like Katura is my pick right now for who would go first based on what we've seen from Bella so far, because everyone seems to be on board together and she's kind of her own thing off to the side, it seems like. So
Yeah, there's a decent chance of that happening.
I don't
Um,
think they go to merge pre-tribal though, or pre-swap at least.
yeah, I mean, I could easily see this being a season just where we go the same route as Matt Singh, where there's eventually in 2 weeks there's going to be two tribe bases left on one tribe that maybe we don't get a full swap, but that get evenly divided between the other two.
Yeah. So these boats, they take the people to I don't know what to call it. Ship Wheel Island, Journey Island, Advantage Island. They haven't really given it a name, but it's
Yeah.
the same thing we've seen the whole new era. And that what's interesting is before they send them off on their ways, they give the three of them time just to get together and talk to each other and get like just talk and relate, which was cool. And we see some interesting stuff here as basically reveals his whole tribe dynamics. And Bruce kind of plays it closer to the chest. And what Drew says is that this is bad gameplay from Bruce being not revealing everything and kind of playing it closer. And I disagree with Drew completely there. I think it's smart by Bruce to not just give everything away the way Brandon did.
Yeah, I strongly agree. I'm not sure why he had that opinion, but I mean he's entitled to it. At the
Because he
same
wanted to
time, yeah,
know
I
stuff.
agree with you. You don't want to be going to something like this where you've just met someone. You don't, it's like go back to Token Teams. You don't have, say, like the opportunity to form the Exile Island Alliance on Shipwheel Island or whatever it's called. Because they're probably only there with each other for about 15 minutes.
Yeah. And so they end up going on their ways. And the thing is, you can play this game, and if you win, you get I forget what the prize was. It was an advantage, I think.
See without power.
Safety. I'm so glad they brought that back. I actually really
Oh, yeah.
I liked when they introduced it in Winners at War. Jeremy didn't play it super well, but
He played
I'm
it
happy they
horribly.
brought that back.
But,
But so there
and I
are
like the fact, too, that it's at this Advantage Island, which and wasn't present in 44. So therefore, unlike when it almost felt broken in 40 to 43, the fact that Safety Without Power is back after a hiatus, I wonder if people will still be thinking of like, oh, we got to start trading advantages before every tribal, or if someone could actually. Oh no, I'm thinking of the other advantage. What am I talking about?
knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power, safety without power.
Yeah,
Geez,
close enough. I don't think we've seen this one since Winners at War.
you're right.
And I will say, and I'm not the biggest winner knowledge is power fan just because like the whole you can't lie thing when like they build the game up as like lying is part of the strategy. But and I've heard Probst say this, which is I kind of agree. The one thing that is kind of cool about knowledge is power is even if they never bring it back and it's never in the game again, the threat of it is there and it's going to make contestants think and they're going to do the little
Yeah, I was
advantage
gonna say
swap
though,
like they
it
did in
would be
43.
interesting to see it, even though it was a complete screw up on my part. It would be an interesting advantage to bring in that you could, if in a situation that you could win it all alone.
Yeah, for sure. And so they're given that opportunity. You can play, and if you win an advantage, and if you lose, you don't get to vote at your next tribal. And we see Bruce this time be like Brandon did earlier, turning down the Beware advantage. Bruce decides to protect his vote. He's not going to play. And
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not going to crush him for it. I get it. I mean, but
I'm not gonna
you're on
crush
a,
him at all. I think it's a really smart decision on Bruce's part.
yeah,
Right now, he looks certainly in a better position in his tribe than Jake or than Katura, and therefore, why bother? You'll you're probably gonna advance, so just keep stable till merge. They're in a great position.
yeah, they are. And so we see Brandon decides to play and he doesn't get the advantage. He comes so close to it. He's doing really well until he can't get the lock and time runs out and he realized he messed up one of the tiles and had the wrong number for his combination lock, which I mean, he got through the first part of it pretty quickly. He had time to try about 5 different combinations with the lock. So if he had just paid attention to the like little lines and design on the tile, he would have gotten it easily. And then the third one, Drew also decides to play, and he does get it. He gets the advantage, and he wins the game. And yeah, like we talked about, the advantage is safety without power. I like the advantage. It makes you think. The only other time we've seen it as winners at war was a player that I love, Jeremy. He had it. I don't think he played it really well, in my opinion, because
Mm,
someone from his alliance ended up going home that tribal. But
he needed to stay.
if he stays, he might go home, though. So, like, I get where he's coming from. It just,
Where he's coming from too, but like he could have had a good shot to win that game.
yeah. And so we see them all go back to their tribes. Drew shows everyone his advantage. And like I'm face palming as he's doing this. But what are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that move?
I mean, it's tough because the second you get on that boat, so you're in a good position because you can win an advantage, but you're in such a bad position no matter what it is. Because if you're totally honest, you've just revealed way too much information, which he
Yeah,
did. And if you're not totally honest, all we've seen the whole time that they've introduced go off on your own and do X, Y, or Z, going back to like Ghost Island, is or even going back to Worlds Apart with the rice and beans, is your tribe not believing you.
yeah. And then right after that, we see Austin showing his clue to Drew. And I like this because we start to see a bit of a duo forming here. And one of them, I forget who, but one of them references a season I love with Token Chains and one of my favorite duos. And they make a JT and Steven reference, which was fantastic. That made me smile just by itself. And so, what do you think about this duo that's forming here?
Um, it's we haven't seen a whole lot of these players, but no, it shall be interesting to see where it goes and how far it works. Should they have to vote? Um,
Yeah,
we should probably get into tribal because we're running out of time.
yeah, we are.
Just to go quickly over the challenge. I'm sure you all know this, but I mean, Lulu loses horribly. There's,
Yeah,
there's nothing we need to really go over that happened in the child immunity.
I will say right after the challenge because like it's been from the vibe from Lulu. This whole episode has been Emily's going home. As the challenge is ending, I'm sitting there thinking, okay, they have to at least consider Brandon at this point.
Yeah.
You can't just go
We'll
Emily
say
right away because
going
you
in,
want to.
Brandon is clearly a challenge liability if he loses Shipwheel Island and he loses the challenge for them in this episode and in the last episode.
Lost two
They will
challenges
continue.
for them in the premiere episode.
Yeah,
So
it's like they will continue to go home. I'm glad he got his experience, but it's just not working.
yeah, so we're scrambling after the challenge. Kaleb and Sabaya and Sean, and we don't have a ton of time to get into this, which I would. They think they found the idol, but it turns out the idol is inside of this large candle that they have to melt it down until the idol reveals itself in the middle of the candle. That's great. I love that.
Oh, I love it too. I found an interesting comment online that someone said, if, say, Emily had it and she was desperate, could she melt it at tribal in front of everybody?
I don't think there'd be time. That'd be cool though.
Yeah,
Emily doesn't know they found it, does she?
no, she doesn't.
She did give them her shot in the dark, which was kind of a.
Yeah,
Ever since that scene with Kaleb, Emily's kind of taken this heel turn, and she's actually been playing pretty well, playing better socially. And so
and that
going
really
into
leads us into the end result, where Emily gets through again, and through improvements in her game and complete weaknesses in Brandon's, and the fact that two players in the opposing alliance don't have votes,
Yeah,
Brandon goes home.
yeah. There was what, three people that voted?
Yeah,
It
all
was
for Brandon.
Emily, Kaleb, and Sean. And so, yeah, they all vote for Brandon. He goes home, and going into tribal, I was predicting and hoping that that's what would happen. We'll see if they keep losing challenges now, because like I've kind of branded them as being the new version of Luzon, but with Brandon gone, maybe they aren't terrible in challenges anymore. Maybe I still like they don't have team chemistry at all, so I think they'll be back at tribal again. But we'll see.
Let's get into Ally Blindside first boot because we have 3.5 minutes.
Yeah, you go first.
Okay. So fitting with what we saw in this episode, I am going to give you an Ally Blindside first boot of just horrible challenge competitors.
Oh, great.
The closer to season. So your options are, we mentioned Luzon a lot. Jatia from Cagayan, Crystal from Gabon,
Oh gosh.
and of course, the queen on the bench herself, Queen Sandra.
Okay, well, Sandra is the only winner, so I have to first boot her first by default. Crystal, I don't know how she was so bad in challenges. She's an Olympian. That's always going to be a
All
mystery to
taken away
me.
through steroids, from what I understand.
Wow, wow, that might make sense. But I think I will. Oh gosh, I don't know what to do because Jatia is just kind of like. I guess I'll blindside Jatia and align with Crystal just so like my tribe can keep its rice for a longer period of time. And for you, I have new era players. This will be interesting to see what you do because they're all kind of the same archetype. But I'm giving you Ricard Fourier, Omer Zahir, and Jesse Lopez.
I like them. Those three, all three players that are some of my favorite guys in the new era.
Yeah.
I've got to align with my fellow Ontarian, Omar. No question there. If we got to a beach, we'd have something in common. Of you, like you guys down south, always like you'll see bonds of like players from the same state. That would be Omar and I up here.
Oh yeah.
I am going to blindside Jesse because I think we saw he took it very well in 43. Not that Ricard didn't, but unfortunately that means I have to first boot Ricard, although I would like to play with all three of them.
Yeah, and they're all pretty similar players also. So this was a fun episode, guys. And since we've got time, real quick shout out to Bello Camp Life, the scene of all the girls and Brando just putting on their buffs as tube tops. Like that's a brand new invention in Survivor that hasn't been happening
Yeah,
for 45 seasons. Was a really funny scene and a good way for Brando to just do it and fit in and build bonds.
yeah, exactly. That was funny.
Grab your torches,
Anyway,
head back to camp. We'll see you next week.
and
Subscribe on YouTube.
and exactly. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on Instagram and on Facebook.
Bye, guys.